Hello and welcome along to another episode and live episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. And it's Daniel Hussey here, as always, joined by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
And on eve of the Premier League season, we've decided to do another one of our fan stories, but this time going again outside the big six, because it's definitely not a top six anymore, especially if Villa want anything to do with it. And that's Aston Villa fan, and it should be said Shamrock Rovers fan as well, Andrew Blair White. Andrew, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be on. Yeah, good night with the Rovers getting through in Europe, and hopefully talk a bit of Villa as well. Hopefully it should be a good season for them. So keeping the fingers crossed. But I was just saying to you guys, I've been on a podcast drought, because I'd say around Cheltenham time, people couldn't wait to, they couldn't find a video that I wasn't on. So I've given the people what they needed, which was a drought of me, but happy to be back.
Yeah, back after the summer break on the eve of the Premier League season. How are you looking ahead to this season? I guess as Villa fan, you're probably as excited as ever. Jack Grealish to side.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. It always is when you've got a lot of money in the club. And these owners seem to be here to play ball. And I think overall the business last year in particular was superb. I think it was probably the best recruitment of all 20 clubs, really, when you think about the impact the players had. Martinez for 20 million, Watkins for 30 million. I know that's it's still big money, obviously, but in the market these days, these were good buys. Even Matty Cash, he's come in and hit the ground running, and you'd like to hope we've brought in again guys that are going to do a good job. You've got a nice mix there of guys that have already proved that they can do it, and a couple, in the case of Leon Bailey, where it's just a complete unknown. You'd love him to be, an absolute superstar. He brings that flair, brings a lot of pace, and whether he's going to be a bit of a bust or whether he's going to be unbelievable, it's hard to know with some of those guys. But I think the business overall has been very good.
Yeah, and then on the Jack Grealish side of things, when did you realize or kind of say to yourself, yeah, he's definitely going to leave this summer, and when did you make your peace with it, or worse, have you even made your peace with it yet?
I've made my peace with it. I suppose up until really the day that it was announced that he was, going for the medical in Man City, because up until then it was still and I was searching Jack Grealish on Twitter, I'd say every hour for a couple of days there looking, and somebody would say he's staying, then somebody would say he's going. But at the end of the day, once the medical stuff started going on, you're there going, well, he's unfortunately going to leave. And I know plenty of Villa fans haven't made peace with it, and maybe won't do. But I don't see the problem myself. I don't have any gripes with Jack Grealish personally. He could have easily left in many other years when the club was in a much worse state. He's constantly signed new contracts every year. I know people were giving out that he's only just signed a contract last year. Surely that was excellent for us, because we've gotten as much money as possible. And I know the board have put that release clause in at 100 million. I think they probably did that thinking that nobody would actually pay it. But now that somebody's paying, 100 million's a lot of money. And I know it's a inflated market, but it's 100 million quid, and we've brought in 3 seriously good players for 100 million quid, which are hopefully going to fill that void. So he's gone. He wants to play Champions League football. He wants to win trophies. People are also saying that it's a money thing. I can assure you, with the Villa owners, it's not a money thing. We would have given him everything he wanted from a monetary perspective. So it's not that case, I don't believe, anyway. I think it's just a case that he wants to further European football, and I can understand that, because if I was him, and I know obviously Southgate had done a great job with squad morale with the English European Euros side, because nobody seemed to have many problems. But if I was Jack Grealish, I'd have been pissed off. Played very little football this summer in the Euros, and he was well good enough to be on that team. And there was a game he came on in the 80th minute and came off in the 95th minute, this sort of stuff. So if he feels going to Man City might further that opportunity of playing more minutes for England, then more luck to him. And I still hope he's every bit as good a footballer as as he was for Villa, because I know people don't want to brand him as a hero, but what he's done for this football club is miraculous, I think. And we've got 100 million for him, and I'd make peace with that.
Yeah, final thing on Grealish, Andrew, is I guess a lot of the frustration from what I've seen the Villa fans, I guess it is Manchester City and this dream come true. I think Villa fans could have made that peace with a Manchester United or, you know, someone like that, or maybe go abroad. But the fact it's a Manchester City, a club that, you know, got a lot of money pumped into them 13 years ago and have just kind of, you know, essentially become a new club, that's probably as frustrating as ever. And then I know I've heard a lot of Villa fans also giving out that, you know, this Pep Guardiola is going to transform Jack Grealish into this centre mid or number 10. But sure, like, he started off as a centre mid with you guys, or at least played a lot of football under Bruce in particular in those central areas as well. So I guess there's combine those two frustrations plus the fact the new contract that maybe a lot of Villa fans had false hope, I guess.
Yeah, I completely see all that. And yeah, like, obviously Man City have, you know, got all this money pumped in, and therefore the kind of the results and the success isn't organic. So it's hard to warm to them. At the same time, I'm a personal believer, and personally, I think Pep Guardiola is an absolute knob, but I think he's the best manager in England by a long stretch. I don't like him, but I probably don't like him because he wins. And I think in terms of going to Man U, where your man Solskjaer is still imitating a manager in my eyes, I think he's gone to the right club in terms of somebody that might bring him to the next level. Now, where that level is going to be, because I'd have thought he was at a pretty high level as it was, I don't know. But like, I know Villa fans love having kind of the goggle vision on, but there's a difference between Pep Guardiola and Dean Smith, as much as it pains me to say it. There are differences in manager tiers there. So I would say Pep will do well with them. The only thing I wouldn't want to see is this case where obviously Man City have got all these fantastic attacking options. And the thing that really would piss me off is if we're halfway through the season and Grealish has spent half the season on the bench, or, you know, playing, you know, Pep will have morphed him into a left wing back or something stupid. Like, you've got to, if you're paying 100 million, got to play him where he needs to play. And hopefully that happens, and hopefully he does the job that I know he can do.
Yeah, Sean, your thoughts on the Jack Grealish transfer and maybe the way the Villa dealt with it? I guess the release clause, like Andrew said earlier on, the 100 million wasn't really meant to be reached by anyone. The fact it was means, I guess, even though, like you said, it was an inflated market, I guess Villa got as much money as you probably could for a player like Jack Grealish.
Out of it. Like, again, it's one of them. Like, I don't think you can blame Jack Grealish, and I think he comes out of it pretty well. I don't think there was not like the stuff with Harry Kane and the flirting, you know, with all this interviews with Gary Neville and saying, you know, what his take on the whole situation is. Jack Grealish kept it really under wraps, and Villa did as well. And I think it's one of them. Like, as Andrew said earlier, he could have left in multiple stages. He could have left while they're in the Championship. He could have left the year they got promoted because of his end to that season. And by staying the way he has, he's not single-handedly, but alongside Dean Smith as the captain, has stabilised Villa, got Villa back in as being, you know, what they were when all of us were growing up, as a top 10 club under the likes of Martin O'Neill. And they've got 100 million for him. So I just think it's a win-win, and they've replaced him really well by the looks of it. I think the only one would be if they can keep Danny Ings fit, but Buendia and Leon Bailey are two extremely good signings who 2 years ago, if you had told Andrew you were going to sign these players for that amount of money, he would have laughed at you. So I think with Grealish, if I was a Villa fan, I don't think you could have any complaints. That's just the nature of football. And, you know, I'm sure Norwich fans are wondering why Emi Buendia has left them for 50 million. That's just professional football. And I think Grealish and Villa have done well out of the deal. But I agree with Andrew. I mean, there'd be nothing worse than seeing Grealish go there and not fulfill his potential. And like, it's not cast iron that he's going to start. I mean, you look at Mahrez, Raheem Sterling, De Bruyne, Foden. Be interesting to see if they do sign Harry Kane, where it all fits for Pep Guardiola. I'm sure he has a master plan, but if you're Grealish, you'd obviously have signed knowing what your role is going to be. So I hope whatever he signed up for works for him and works for Aston Villa, or sorry, works for Man City in the long run, because I think Villa have got the best deal they could have got.
Yeah, and Sean, you picked out in your players to watch for the whole season in all 20 clubs as Buendia. You're a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant. You know, he was very good for Norwich in the Premier League. I think they were a little bit unlucky, Norwich, with, you know, I did think they were always short of probably staying up, but I don't think the lockdown helped them. But I think he third highest or fourth highest chances created in the league from open play. He ripped up the championship really last year. They won it single-handedly on his own, and he was always destined for a move. And I think Villa were very, very quick, got the deal done in what seemed like minutes really before the Copa America started. And you know, they've got Emi Buendia, they have, I'm not sure a direct replacement for Jack Grealish, but certainly a player they're going to get behind and they're going to love watching.
Yeah, and probably the most popular striker at the moment on fantasy, or one of them, is Danny Ings. And I guess those signings that Villa did, probably the most impressive bit about the Jack Grealish thing is they had those transfers in before the Jack Grealish deal was done, whereas even Southampton now are chasing after losing a couple of players. You have clubs always chasing, and other clubs know they have the money, whereas Villa kind of got their business done early, which is something you don't see from many clubs, particularly the likes of the bigger clubs as well.
Yeah, I think it was very good business and also quite clever, because I think if you'd left it till after Grealish had left, you know, clubs like Norwich could have completely held you up for ransom with Buendia, you know, charge any price because they know you need somebody. As for, we were buying these guys in, I think, on the proviso that, you know, if Grealish was to leave, these are what's going to happen. And on the off chance that Grealish is going to stay, well, happy days. That would have been kind of a Brucey bonus, really. But I think, as Sean says there, I've watched an awful lot of Buendia, and he looks a class act, and he's not going to fulfill everything that Jack does, but he's got plenty of creativity. And I think the fact, I know it's probably going to be hard for you two guys, but the fact that we actually got him ahead of Arsenal does show where the club's going, which I'm not for a second saying that we're going to finish ahead of Arsenal or anything, but I think it's a good step for us, because it just goes to show the ambition the owners are showing, the ambition, you know, the whole club has at the moment, that we seriously want to become a top 6, top 7 club. We're not just going and kind of consolidating in mid-table. We really want to go to the next level, and it's players like Buendia, it's players like Danny Ings that are going to bring you to that next level. You asked me about how disappointed a Villa fan would be with Grealish. I'd be absolutely heartbroken if I was a Southampton fan and Danny Ings is left to Villa, because I would say if you're a Southampton fan, you're not thinking Villa's much of a step up. You're probably thinking you're on a very similar wavelength. Like, fair enough if he goes to Spurs or Arsenal, Liverpool, these sort of clubs, but like, it came out of the blue, you probably would have been left kind of real kicking the balls territory. But for a Villa fan, it was brilliant. You were just, because it was in amongst all this Grealish negativity, and suddenly Danny Ings was signed. It was just as if they had this one in the works for ages. But I think he's a great signing, because you just know if he stays fit, he's going to get you that 15, 20 goals a season. And I think it adds a really interesting option how he's going to work with Watkins. Is Watkins going to go out left, or are the two of them maybe going to find a way of playing together up front? That's something I'm not sure yet. I think in pre-season it's shown they've kind of done an awful lot of mixing and matching. But I think with Ings and Buendia, and then like the one that, with all of this, that's getting kind of completely overshadowed is Ashley Young for a freebie, like. And I couldn't care what age he is. He's as fit as a fiddle, and he knows how to win. And when you've got, I'm a firm believer in any sport, if you've got kind of firm winners in your team environment, whether it's in football, whether it's in rugby, whether it's in cricket, you know, you got guys that know how to get over the line in big games that are going to maybe bring you to that next level. I think somebody like Ashley Young around the squad is absolute gold dust, because he's been there. He's got the ticket, and he's won an awful lot of trophies wherever he's been.
Yeah, and I guess for Villa, like Ashley Young, actually, I think preseason's been playing midfield, Sean, but they've definitely got a team there now that could potentially challenge for a top 6, top 8 finish. what are your kind of predictions for Villa? Where did you have them in your 1 to 20 actually, and roughly, and where do you see them finishing this year? Because as Andrew said, there's a lot of options they have now.
Yeah, I think I had them somewhere around ninth or 10th. The one thing we did say is I think maybe the loss of John Terry could be interesting to see how that played out, because I don't think it's a massive coincidence that or it's not a coincidence that the Villa's back four last year, especially with Emi Martinez in goal. I mean, their record was outstanding, especially in some of those big games as well. And obviously Tyrone Mings had, he started those first couple of games for England, the Euros, and did very well. So there is a lot of optimism for Villa. But I'm just interested to see how that played out, and that seemed to happen fairly abruptly with Terry. And I'm sure there's a coaching job further down the line for him in the Championship maybe, but that's the only thing I'm interested to see. But absolutely, I think Villa's recruitment has been pretty good for the last couple of years, and it just seems to be working in the right direction. And the one thing you would say now is they look to be a really well-rounded side. That there doesn't look to be an awful lot of weaknesses there. The goalkeeper is very strong. The two centre backs are good. Maybe I think Andrew would like probably an extra midfielder in there. Maybe someone of the mold of a Ward Prowse, or I've seen names like Basuma linked. But other than that, they seem to have a lot of things spot on, Villa. And I think if you're a Villa fan, it's probably the most optimistic you've been for a number of years. But you're also looking at the players, and there's so much quality in Villa's ranks that you've lost, one of the best players in the Premier League, and Jack Grealish. They seem to have coped well and replaced him pretty well. And I think that the sky really is the limit for Villa. I think they've almost, if you like, jumped ahead of the likes of Wolves and Everton in the last, it seems like 12 months or 15 months, that you almost feel if you count Leicester in the top 7, it's probably Villa who are the 8th best team, or the next team off the next cab off the rank. And where, was it 2 years ago that they were floundering under Steve Bruce in the Championship, and the football wasn't great, and all of a sudden they're back with flying colours. And I think the best thing for Villa is Dean Smith being a Villa fan growing up, that connection to the club as well. I just think you have to like it, and you have to like what Dean Smith has done with his career, starting off in Walsall and going to Brentford and getting his dream job. And he's been lucky that he's been backed by the owners, but he's taken them with both hands, and he's got Villa in a really, really strong position.
Yeah, and two in Sabi as well is a good sign, and I think too to add more options to that back four for Villa. So there's definitely like options there. I say a lot of people listen to podcasts, Andrew. Maybe we live in our big 6 club world over here at the top. We're probably wonder how you ended up supporting the Villa. So can you give us a bit of a backstory of how that came about?
Yeah, well, probably not dissimilar to many that end up with kind of I suppose one of the non-big 6. It was just family stuff. So my granddad was a massive Villa man. He was a season ticket holder for I think 30-40 years back in the good old days. He was there for all the 1982 history stuff, and then got obviously dad into it, and then probably from a young age it was for me it wasn't much option apart from Villa and Shamrock Rovers. Those were the 2 options you had, and I've kind of gone down both routes, but it's been great. There's been ups, there's been downs. Like when I was kind of really getting into it, I suppose, like I remember bits and bobs when it was back in kind of the 05-06 David O'Leary days, which probably weren't the greatest, but under Martin O'Neill, they were a team that everyone seemed to like. They were probably what Southampton have been the last couple of years. When they were a good team, everyone didn't mind them. They played quite nice football under Martin O'Neill. They had a really good team for a couple of years there, and then we went through a few horror years, and that the year we went down under Remy Gard, like genuinely, I've put up a better fist on Football Manager than Remy Gard did that year. He just completely gave up. And it was really sad to watch, because you had a lot of guys there that were on a lot of money just going through the motions. Your Joleon Lescott's, even Ekbon Lahore. And I know Ekbon Lahore loves to give it the big one these days on Talk Sport. But like the last couple of years, like I know he was a legend back in the day, but the last couple of years for Villa, he was pants. Like, and he was one of the main contributors to us going down. And then as Sean says, we had a couple of rocky roads in the in the championship, I remember we started off our first year down in the championship with Robert Di Matteo in charge, and you thought it was all going to be great, and then he got sacked after I think 8 games, and then we had Bruce, which got only so far. So it's really been up and down, but you go into this year with optimism, which actually kills me, because it's the worst thing in football is hope. It's the hope of being good. Like when you're going into a year and you're going, we're really up against it. Like last year. If last year at the start of the year you gave me 17th position, I'd have snapped your hand off. Just stay up. And then we were like bound to stay up by Christmas time. The whole thing is a piece of piss by then. But this year you're going in hoping you're finishing 8th or 9th. And it can only go one way, I believe, and then you'll end up in 14th and you'll be all back to square one. But it's why I love it so much, I can't... if you're winning all the time, it surely gets a little bit dull at some stage. So we certainly don't suffer from that. So it's been an interesting journey. Let's just put it that way.
On the Steve Bruce side of things, like you lost that championship playoff final to Fulham, wasn't it? So there was a chance that Bruce could have brought you back to the Premier League, and I'd say things would turn out a lot different if that was the case, and maybe Dean Smith might never would have got a crack at the job. Yeah, exactly. It's a hard one at the time because when we didn't win that game, we were in a lot of financial debt and under the previous owners, and we had a Chinese guy that had come in, and I don't think he was too safe with his finances, really. He kind of pumped money in and then didn't have any money left, which isn't really a way of doing things sustainably. So we were lucky with the current owners. They came in and cleared all that debt, and we were back to square one. But I just think with Bruce, you see it at Newcastle, like Bruce is a grand manager. Like he does a job, and I don't think Newcastle are never going to go down under him, I don't believe. But at the same stage, there's no real hope that it's going to go anywhere. Other than finishing maybe 11th or 12th, you're just going to be in that kind of 11th to 15th run all the time. And that could easily have happened with us. Now, it's a hard one. Like I always think this with football, especially when you're in the championship. I know people had a lot of ill feelings to Bruce, but he, as you say, he almost brought us back, and he's the type of guy that gets teams promoted. And, you'd prefer to play, like it's a hard toss-up between, do you want to play nice football but stay in the championship, or do you want to play a little bit rough and ready but actually go back into the Premier League? In the end, we managed to get some type of a balance with Dean Smith, but Dean Smith, I think, has evolved an awful lot as a manager over the last year or two, but let nobody convince you otherwise. The year we went up under Dean Smith was solely because of Jack Grealish. We were in the shitter with 10 games to go in that season. We had to win, I think we had to win 10 games from 12. When Grealish came back from injury, first game back, scored a wonder goal against Derby. We win 4-0 and we won 10 on the bounce. And then he kind of guided us through the playoffs, and through hook or by crook, we ended up back in the Premier League. And I think Dean Smith has come a long way since then, but he probably needed that, because if we hadn't gone up in that playoff final against Derby, I actually don't think Smith would have stayed in a job that summer. So it's that those are the fine lines, I suppose. He's probably earning heaps of coin now and couldn't have more job security. But these are the small things, I suppose, and that's where you have your Dean Smiths and you have your Gary Rowett's. I always thought Gary Rowett was an excellent championship manager, and he's now just doing the rounds between really average teams. But he never got that break, never got up. And if you don't get up, unfortunately, those sort of careers can kind of whittle down the drain pretty quickly. Sean, I see you smiling at a lot of that, particularly about the championship, because the championship's your bread and butter, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I do enjoy it, I have to say. But a few people are giving out to me that I've gone off the Sheffield United bandwagon because I turned them on last week against Birmingham, and I saw about 2 minutes of it, and I thought I saw enough. But the thing is, no, I agree fully with there. And the thing with that year with Villa is, from my memory, is they just got on a roll. I mean, there was the West Brom game in the playoff when I think it was Hourihane scored, and the atmosphere was just brilliant at Villa Park again. And I think a lot of that is Andrew said, is down to Jack Grealish. I think a lot of people will remember the the second City derby when against Birmingham at St Andrews, where he got kicked up and down the pitch, he got punched in the head, and he scored the goal. And it was just, and I think the steward had a go at him as well, but he was, I think a lot of people really, because Grealish, he kind of, if you like, he kind of bursted onto the scene a little bit when he first came on. And I think a lot of people kept an eye out here in Ireland because obviously he was playing under the Irish jersey. But that's when I remember that kind of run into the end of the season going, he will develop into a top player. I didn't think he'd develop into probably what he is, which is probably just short of world class. But he was brilliant in that running. And I think Villa, they're always been a likable club. There's certain clubs that I think you always enjoy watching, or you're like a Newcastle or a Villa, where they're big traditional clubs, and like Leeds, you just want them to do well. You want them to be in the Premier League. And some of the players, I used to love some of the players under that Martin O'Neill side. Your Petrovs, your John Carew, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, and people like that. And that's probably the nature with someone like Villa. And to see them back, obviously near the top 10 again, and probably going to be competing for a European spot this year. I think it's just brilliant for them, really. And when Andrew mentioned Remy Gard, I just vividly remember him. Paul Lambert was there, Tim Sherwood, and to see them now with like I said, with some of the players they're signing and the dough they're spending on some of these players, it's amazing, that transformation. And I think it's probably a lesson for some of those clubs that do get a chance back in the Premier League, or to flex their muscles a little bit. And I'm sure if you're Everton, who have extremely wealthy owners who are putting a lot of money in, and they're going to build this brand new stadium, that your fortunes can turn quickly. Because for Everton, really since Martinez, and even with Martinez, it's been really predictable for Everton. You're 13th, anywhere from 13th to 7th or 8th, and if you can get the recruitment right, which Everton haven't, they probably had their best recruitment summer last year, that there is that bit of hope that you can get sustainability, and you can have some of the players that Villa do. Because like I said, some of the players playing for Villa now, if you said we're going to play for them 2 or 3 years ago, you would have got laughed at. So it's just an interesting case in how quickly, your success or your fortunes at a football club can change. And that's, a lot down to Dean Smith, but also probably with the development that Jack Grealish encountered. So it's really his exciting times for Villa.
With the money, it was funny actually watching the overlap today with Roy Keane, and everyone was kind of saying they know Jack Grealish from here, and Roy's like, I obviously know Jack Grealish, and there's a pause, and I was thinking, how on earth does Roy Keane know Jack Grealish? And I completely forgot that he was under Paul Lambert for a while with Grealish and Villa, and the way you kind of spoke of him as a nice lad. But I've written out a few players here, Andrew. I might go through them. So the first one that Sean mentioned is probably a good way to start is John Carew.
He's an absolute legend, John Carew. He had one of the great songs as well. Yeah. But I thought he was I think people underestimate actually how good a centre forward he was. He was proper old school bruiser as well. Like, he was just a hold up man. And probably one of my worst memories as being a Villa fan was I was actually in the away end for the Makeda goal against Villa.
Oh yeah,
the 3-2 game. But what people forget about that was John Carew scored one of the greatest headers I have ever seen in the Premier League that day, off a Gareth Barry floater from the left, and he just got his big nog on it. He just always seemed to head goals in, and he also had a great celebration where he'd actually go past the goal at the Holt End in Villa and just put his arms out, and kind of around 10 in the front row could kind of grasp onto him, which I always think is you have to be kind of a certain kind of alpha level of crowd favourite to get that in. But no, he was top class. I was glad I saw him as many times as I did. I managed to see him at, I'd say, 7 or 8 games between Villa Park and that game at Old Trafford, and I'm very glad I did.
The best thing about John Carew is that the playoff final when him and Prince William are celebrating with each other. I just think one of the funniest things ever you'll see.
Oh yeah, it was class. It was class. And you could tell that Prince William was loving it, like, even more than John Carew. Like, he was in his element being beside your man. But yeah, no, that was fantastic.
There was also my first memory of Villa, right, is the Arsenal 2001-2002 video I had. So I didn't really watch that season. I only kind of remember 2002-03, but it's 2001-02 and it's the Villa Birmingham derby. And the I think it's Olaf Melberg takes the throw and back to Peter Ekliman, who somehow misses the ball and it goes
Peter
in.
Enkelman.
Any memory to him? I guess he might have been before your time, but
yeah, I was around 2 years old then. It still haunts me. Yeah, poor guy. That man had a lot of moral strength because some idiot came out of the Birmingham crowd and like properly gave it the big one in his face, and I'm sure he was quite close to having a swing. Like you must have been like. But it's interesting looking back on that goal that these days that wouldn't have been a goal. I'm led to believe because he didn't actually touch the ball, and therefore a throw in that goes straight in isn't a goal. I'm led to believe that anyway. But yeah, no, it's a stinker for poor old Peter. He wasn't one of the all-time great keepers we had, but to be fair, we've had a lot of shit keepers in our time as well. So we're all almost having a nosebleed with Martinez. It's we don't know what to do with such a good keeper, like who actually claims the ball, can save good balls, a lot of clean sheets. Better than Aaron Ramsdale anyway, which you lads seem to be fishing
Andrew,
around with.
24 to 30 million, rising to 30 million, I think is the deal. I remember Villa with Fantasy Premier League being really a big fan of the defenders and that Martin Lawrence and Olaf Melberg partnership, wasn't it?
Yeah, Larsson and Melberg. Larsson was a serious player. Had problems with his knees, unfortunately, which kind of prevented him from being very good. And then Olaf Melberg, he was just one of those guys that you just love at your club. I remember his last game for Villa was an away game to West Ham, and like those days were in Upton Park. I'd say it was 2,500, 3,000 in the away, and he bought every single travelling fan a shirt as his like going away game. Where I thought like that's just a touch of class, like, and everyone loved. And he was a seriously good player as well. And I think he even went on then a couple of years after Villa. And he was as old as the hills at this stage, and he played for Olympiacos for a couple of years in the Champions League, and he was still just as good as ever. Like,
well, I think Melberg is one of them players that every time you watch the major tournament, he just seemed to be there as the Swedish captain. Like about 6 or 7, even up to say the World Cup in 2014, he was still playing.
He was still somehow in the squad. Like, he was just one of these guys.
One of those lads that you watch Sweden, yeah.
Him and Seb Larsson.
Yeah. Seb Larsson, yeah. He seemed to be around for ages as well. There's a few. Gabby Bonlor.
Yeah, well, as I said with Bonlor, it's kind of bittersweet with him really, because he was obviously so good under Martin O'Neill, and I think everyone knew how quick he was. And I remember that summer that I think it was linked that him and Ashley Young were going to go in a double move to Real Madrid for 60 million, which like at that time was just ludicrous cash. And to Real Madrid as well, which when you think of where Bonlor ended up, it was just bizarre thinking yeah, but him and Jamie O'Hara just abusing Leeds for some reason. I've no idea why. Leeds are a great team to watch, but yeah, no, it was just a shame how it kind of ended with like Bonlor. He kind of let himself go, really put on a bit of weight, kind of wasn't as quick as he used to be, and it kind of all faded and all went off in fairly poor terms in the end, which you don't really want. Like with the likes of Carew and even now with Ashley Young coming back, like it's just that perfect, club legend, and nobody has issues with these guys. The likes of Ashley Young, obviously going to Man U, it's not dissimilar to Grealish going to Man City now. That was the thing 10 or 11 years ago. I think he went for around 20 million, which was big cash back then, and he did seriously well for Man U, and now he's come back. And geez, if you tell me that in 7-8 years time Jack Grealish will come back to Villa for a year or two, I'd absolutely love that. I love those guys coming back. We get a lot of that at Rovers, where you get guys that have been over to to England and stuff like that. The likes of Joe O'Brien comes back to his local club and still gives it loads for, probably the last 2 or 3 years of his footballing career. So I love those sort of kind of happy homecoming stories. And I think with Young and with Carew and all these guys, it ended on a nice note. And with Bon Lahore, it's certainly for myself, it's always been left on a bit of a sour one.
Gareth Barry then?
Yeah, another one, another legend, yeah. Little bit disappointed that he didn't come back to Villa instead of going to Everton when he went there after his Man City days. But, you can't win them all, I suppose. He was an excellent player, had a serious left foot on him. And I actually loved him even when he was playing for Everton in like the twilight of his career, because he would actually, if you looked at him closely, he wouldn't move from around a 15-yard kind of diameter within kind of the semicircle. He would just patrol in there. He'd sweep up and then just play the ball on. Sweep up, play the ball on. Like, he was a guy that just knew his game seriously well. We obviously got him like before he obviously went to Man City, and the first couple of years at Man City was probably where he was at the peak of his powers. But he was some man with a left foot, Barry, and he was a seriously good footballer.
Yeah, Sean, for you, again, you probably followed a lot of Villa as well. Stian Petrov was another name that sprung up to me there today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was brilliant. But he was a part of that Villa side that probably, a lot of us would first remember, with Barry, with Milner, with Bon Lahore, Carew. Petrov was outstanding. And then obviously everything that happened with him post with, I think it was leukemia he had, and his battle back with that. And he that was a brilliant story. Probably in recent years for a lot of Irish fans, it's probably been Glenn Whelan and Conor Hourihane in midfield for Villa. And I know with Hourihane, he scored a couple of very memorable goals. He got one in that West Brom game, and I think that's almost part of being a cult hero, is when you have those moments. Like the Villa keeper was a Jed Steer in that playoff game where he's staring into the eyes of Mason Holgate. I think if you have a moment like that, you instantly just become like a cult hero, almost like a Makeda is at United, or someone like an Arshavin is for Arsenal, or Welbeck is that goal against Leicester. So I think some of those moments just elevate you. But Petrov in particular was a brilliant player, and Villa were always great on fancy. I know you mentioned that earlier, but they always like that clean sheet with Larsson and Melbury. I know Larsson used to always score loads of goals as well, and he used to rack up the points.
It was a seriously good team back then when you think about it, because you had Ashley Young and Stuart Downing on the two wings that were serious players, and then kind of a midfield three of Barry, Petrov and James Milner. Like, it was a serious side. And kind of in amongst it all, you somehow had Carlos Cuellar at right back, which defied belief because he was a bang average player. But and Wilfred Bouma was at left back for a while as well, also bang average player. But no, it was a seriously good team.
The one player I was going to ask you about, Andrew, sorry, Dan, is Fabian Delph, because that was a very sour move when he went to City. Yeah,
it was. It was probably worse than the Grealish situation, because I think he said around 3 days prior, I can't wait to crack on with Villa this year. And then he was off on his bike. Delph was an excellent player. He's a funny player, because no matter what, no matter how the game was going, whether we were playing pre-season or a big, Birmingham, derby game, Fabian Delph would get booked. No matter, and if you were in the 93rd minute and he hadn't been booked, he would do something. He'd kick the ball away. He'd kick somebody. He would do something to get a yellow card. It was as if it was just in his contract. I must get a yellow card, which was quite bizarre because he didn't need to at all. But he was a very good player, and certainly the year under when Sherwood took over in kind of February time. And we stayed up when we were in an unpromising position. We actually made the final of the FA Cup before you lads hammered us. Delph was kind of at the forefront of that. And he scored a dinger of a goal against West Brom, I think, in the FA Cup quarter-final. And then people started running onto the pitch at Villa Park, which seemed a bit over the top. But It was a seriously good goal. And you kind of felt at that stage that his career at Villa was really, really taking off. He'd just become the captain, and then it was that summer that then he left. And it's a hard one because, you know, his career hasn't quite fulfilled, I don't believe, where it could have been. I thought he was it could have gone, you know, more up than it did. Now maybe he's looking at it going, he's probably won a couple of Premier Leagues and, you know, plenty of medals here and there with Man City. I didn't think he covered himself in the greatest light in that All or Nothing documentary. He came across as a bit of a knob in the changing rooms. And when he started telling Pep about tactics, I was like, just don't do that.
The basics.
Yeah, all about the basics. Of all people to be spouting on, like, when companies to sitting beside him, like, so much better than you. Like, but no, he's it was a hard one to take at the time, certainly, because you just felt he was getting, I suppose, to where Grealish was. It would have been like Grealish leaving maybe 2 summers ago, and you feel there was a bit of unfinished business there, and you feel you could have gotten another, certainly one big season out of him. And obviously the year then he left, all things went tits up under Sherwood and then Remy Gard. So I don't think he's probably number one fan of the Villa fans at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments on the YouTube. Keep them coming in there. We're going to get to the quick fire now in a second, but Villa Lions, the best one there. Big Ron's team with the Ireland team. Ray Houghton, Stevie Staunton, God, Paul McGrath, obviously Andy Townsend. Love them players. And I guess on a little bit more old school, or somewhere between the old school and your memories, Andrew, my particular 3 lads that stood out to me were, well, Thomas Hitzelberger, which is probably a little bit more modern, but Dion Dublin, who of course, you know, homes under the hammer deal in Dublin. And my favourite all-time cult hero striker, I think, for Teletext, a player that would always get a goal, is Juan Pablo Angel.
Yeah, I was about to say him. Juan Pablo Angel was mustard, like, and he had the long hair, like he was the long hair guy before long hair was a fashion, like, and used to always score as well. I remember back, now this is real Badger talk, this, but they used to have these like little figurines that were like bobbleheads but had like big foreheads. I remember getting the Juan Pablo Angel one. I was thinking, my world has come to fruition here. I'm 5 years old. I've got the Juan Pablo Angel thing, and you could kind of play almost Subutio with these things. I was thinking, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. But yeah, no, he was a legend. Also had a good celebration in him as well, which is, I think, a hallmark of a good striker is a man that can have a good celebration. John Carew was the officer of celebration. So. But Angel was a serious player back in the day. He was a bit before my time, but I certainly remember him vividly.
And of course, Emil Heskey as well.
Yeah, well, that one wasn't maybe one of the great ones, but he's actually a very good player. Heskey just didn't score goals, like. But no, he had a few rogue ones over the years. Like, when you think about it. As Sean was saying, even in recent years, some of the lads we had when we were in the Championship and stuff like that were bizarre characters. But we've certainly seen it all.
I was going to say Liam Ridgewell to you, because he did a tour of all the Midlands clubs, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He was just some guy. You just did, like, you know, one of these people that just has a punchable face almost. You're like, oh. Then he left to go to Birmingham, and the year he left to go to Birmingham, we played them in a derby, and he scored an own goal, and it was possibly the greatest scenes that the St Andrews away end has ever seen. The place almost ran down. Like, it made the Grealish goal a couple of years ago look like some pre-season goal. But no, he was just an average footballer. Like, he was just one of these guys, just didn't like him because he was average, and then he left to go to Birmingham. It's just a no-no.
Another one I was going to say to you.
Well, listen, Andrew, we'll do great with your time. We'll get to the quick fire. A few good questions here. Go on, Sean, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Andrew, was the Gardner brothers as well, because they enjoyed a nice tour around as well.
Yeah, jeez. Craig Gardner was actually not a bad player. Kind of a proper, like, he toured teams that finished between like kind of 14th and 17th in the Premier League. You know, and he'd play right back one year, and then he'd be in the centre midfield, and then he'd be left back. He'd be with the gloves the following year. Like, he just kind of played in every position. Then Gary Gardner, he actually scored a great header, I think, against Birmingham or West Brom. It was one of the big derbies. And that was the only good thing he did for Aston Villa. He was an average player of all average players. And we've had plenty of them in our time, but he was right up there at the top.
Right, so we'll get to the questions, Andrew. First one, what's your favourite signing of all time?
I would say in recency bias, Martinez, because it's just
it's no need for that now.
Such a good signing, like. There's the signing of the Premier League last year, like in terms of value. So,
and not even value. I'd nearly say without the money, like if you spend 50 million on him, I'd still think that's a good deal, you know.
But that is quite recency bias, to be fair.
Yeah, we're signing.
Jeez, plenty of those. There was a couple in the Championship that were ropey. No, actually, yes, it was while we were in the Championship a couple of years ago. We brought in a Croatian goalkeeper called Kalinic. That was meant to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. We bought him, I think, for 8 million. He played 2 games, conceded 7 goals, never played again. It's the biggest waste I've ever seen.
He's done well to pip Darren Bent to that one, hasn't he?
Well, at least Darren Bent scored some goals. Like, there was like small grains of hope. Like, imagine paying that much for somebody. Him coming in, like, he was like an Emi Martinez. Like, he was a 6'7", built like a brick, meant to be this class keeper. Like, he played 20 times for Croatia or something. And then he was dismal. And that was through a time where we had no keepers. Like, we had Jed Steer, we had Neeland, we had Kalinic. Like, Jed Steer was fantastic. I see that Mika Richards, he wasn't great either. Lescott, though, was the one that drove me up the wall in comparison to Mika Richards. When he tweeted his new car, oh, sorry, it was in my pocket. Like, it was the most phony excuse ever. Like, there was a couple then. Yeah, fair.
Would you get over many times to the Villa? You mentioned you've been a few matches.
Yeah, would try to get over, I'd say, in a normal year, obviously. I'd get over to around 3 or 4 home games a year, which is not as much as I'd like it to be, but obviously, as you guys probably know, going over to Arsenal and stuff like that, it's an expensive sport, Premier League football. When you're doing the day trips, and the day trips are long days, but you feel like kind of aggrieved to go and stay the night because it then adds cost and stuff like that. But we really tried to go as many times as possible. We went on a rank run at one stage. Now that I say it, the first game we ever went was, I think, in 2008. We beat Reading 3-1. Larson actually scored. Scored a cracking header. And the next 9 games we went to Villa, they did not score a goal.
No way.
3 0-0s, 4 1-0 defeats, and 2 2-0 defeats.
It's not even you saw loads of goals.
No. We lost a couple of the great ones. We lost 1-0 to Roy Keane Sunderland in, I think, April of that year. And it was the year they hadn't won an away game all year. And they won. Michael Chopra scored with around 5 minutes to go. We played Wigan at home. First game of a season, I think, when the first year they had the like a luminescent yellow. And we lost 2-0, and your man Rodallega scored that like goal over his shoulder. Had 2 games against Portsmouth that were 0-0s. Oh, geez, it was disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. Because we kept going, like we kept picking games that you'd look at and go, yeah, we could win that. A bit like, if you're an Arsenal fan, you'd pick home to Burnley thinking we could win this 3-0 and we have a good day. And it was like doing that and then Burnley winning 1-0. And you're going, oh, Lord, it's actually the worst day to have gone.
Away days then, because you were on the podcast before and you said you were at a game in Turf Moor, but that might have been for something different. So have you been to an away game at all? Or?
Yeah, well, I was obviously at that Old Trafford game. I've been to the Hawthorns a couple of times for a few of those games, which are tasty enough. Unfortunately, I haven't been.
Just on the West Brom one, is their song? Does it always go like this, or is it just when they play Villa? The fuck the Villa West Brom, or do they just get that out when you're playing you guys?
Well, I haven't been to be fair, I haven't been to the Hawthorns when they haven't played Villa, so I can't really comment. But they and I think it's a good song as well. Brutal, but no, I've actually been to a lot of different grounds, but not unfortunately with Villa, because we go over just as a family sometimes to kind of Yorkshire area. So I've been a fair few times to Ellen Road, Bramall Lane, Hillsborough. Hillsborough's an absolute library. It was soulless because it's obviously big, but Sheffield Wednesday at the moment aren't a big club. Or they're not as big as they could be. Bramall Lane was really good. Ellen Road's class. Obviously, I've got a very soft spot for York City down in the Conference North, and they've moved from Bootham Crescent to their new ground. So we're hopefully going to go over there now and see that. So I've been to plenty of these. I've been to Bradford Park Avenue's ground, not Bradford Football Club, Bradford Park Avenue for a York City away day in the Conference North. So there's been a few, some people might think that's mentally deranged behaviour, but I suppose when you go to all the League of Ireland grounds, it doesn't seem too bad.
It's the next step up, I guess, yeah. Final couple then. What's your favourite moment? Tough question probably, but your favourite moment as a Villa fan, that one moment that sticks out. Well, I suppose I was there. I was very, very lucky to be at the playoff final. It was only the second time I've ever been to Wembley, and I actually almost threw up before the game. I've never experienced nerves like it. It was just a weird feeling, because you kind of feel like you'd have a few pints and really enjoy your day. And I was having pints and thinking, these are repeating on me. And then the 90 minutes, we obviously played well. We played super for 70 minutes and then played like an absolute drain for the last 20 minutes when we were 2-0 up. And then your man Marriott scored with 10 minutes to go, and you're like, oh no, it's the longest 10 minutes of my life. But I suppose in terms of just the atmosphere, that was brilliant. Seeing the first goal I saw in Villa Park was a John Carew header against Reading. That will always live with me. But yeah, no, I would say overall for the day that was in it, the playoff final, you'd find it hard to beat. It was only time I've been in Wembley where it's been full 90,000, and it is to be fair, it is some place when you get that. And I think actually the Championship playoff final is as big a game as they have all year, because you just feel the tension. Like, it's such a massive game, and going down Wembley Way and stuff like that. It was actually coming back out Wembley Way after the game, after we'd won. Like, you were just in the middle and all these chants going on, and it was like, if you could bottle up 15 minutes of atmosphere, it would have been that 15 minutes, because it's something that if you hadn't experienced, you'd have been sick, because it was one of the greatest days of football and sport that I've ever witnessed. I'd hate being the one to kill the mood then, but the next question is the worst moment you've had as a Villa fan. Because that was it. You're honestly, it was a bit emotional listening to you there, Andrew, but I feel bad asking the next one.
No, plenty of those.
Here,
so. The season under guard was just was horrendous. Like, it was just painful to watch. In terms of individual moments, I remember back in the day I believed we got cheated out of a Capital One Cup final against Man U when Vidic should have certainly been sent off. And we got a penalty for it, but it was Stonewall red card, and he gave him a yellow. We went 1-0 up, lost 2-1. I felt very aggrieved by that. The whole season under Alex McLeish, or Alex McLoser as I like to call him, he is some sack of shit. Boring, came from Birmingham, tried to get us relegated, just failed. Like those were sad enough days. But there's been more positive days than bad days, I'd have said. Just about.
Okay, couple of proper one-word answers here now. So, your favorite player
of the current squad?
Yeah, or no, of all time?
Carew.
Wow. Okay, and then your favorite manager?
Martin O'Neill.
Worst manager?
McLeish.
Yeah, I'm surprised it took us 55 minutes to get to McLeish, and we did there. Last one, I just wanted one of the comments from earlier, and you mentioned this top of the show, lads, very quickly in a couple of lines. Thoughts on Watkins and that Danny Ings side of things, just from Joshua Stacey on YouTube. Is that going to be a case, Andrew, where they're going to rotate like you said, or is it going to be properly Ollie on the left and build the team around Danny Ings?
I find it hard to know. I think we're playing around with it at the moment. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it can't work when you bring in another big centre forward. And you have to remember, Ollie Watkins played, I'd say, 99% of the season last year up front on his own. It's going to be if you suddenly just shove him out on the left. I know he played there for Brentford, but it's a completely different position. And it's the one thing about the Ings signing that would concern you is it going to affect Watkins? And is he not going to have as good a season? Because I thought he was immense last year. I would say he will start out on the left, because I would say overall on the balance of things, we'll try to keep the same system, which was this kind of 4-2-3-1. But I actually don't know how he's going to get on out there. I'm a little bit dubious. I'd love him to be good, but I know some people that think he might bounce this year, and I really hope not, because he's a terrific worker and he's a seriously good player.
Sean?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. It's been a while since he did play there on the left, if you like, and he played a bit under Dean Smith. And Dean Smith knows Ollie Watkins really well. That's the one thing I would say. He is bringing Danny Ings in, but he has worked with Ollie Watkins for a long, long time, and it's been a huge part of his development. But if you spend 30 million on the two of them, separately, you'd want them both to be playing together. But that being said, you spent the money on Buendia, spent the money on Bailey. You really want all four of them playing. And then if you're a Traore or someone, you're probably asking why you're not playing. So it's a good complaint to have, but I think at times we'll see it a little bit flexible. I think at times you might see him almost as a two split strike, or maybe Buendia in behind them, or play two up top and with two wingers and Buendia coming in off the left. The one thing I would say is if you do play both of them, it maybe leaves your midfield a little bit exposed, and that's one thing I think Villa, if they were to improve, is maybe that extra central midfielder, and maybe, who knows, still a couple of weeks left in the market, that after a couple of games they might have to go to the well and get someone. But I do think we'll see them both play together a lot, and Watkins has that ability to play on the left.
Yeah, and then you've obviously got El Ghazi, or as I heard him referenced earlier, El Golzi. So there's always El Golzi as well up there. Andrew, I always ask this question at the end of fan stories. This has been your hour now to kind of chat about your club. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned, or any player or moment you want to mention, or anything to get off your chest? Feel free to speak now.
No, not much to get off my chest. I suppose the one guy, the current squad, that we probably didn't give much air to is Mings, and I love Mings. He's the type of guy you'd want to go into war with, type of guy I'd like by my side, because nobody would come near you because he's a brick house. But he's going to take over being the captain now with Grealish gone, it's a huge moment for him and for the club. And I personally don't see Mings actually going to one of the top clubs in the next couple of years. I just, for some reason, I feel Konzo will be the one that will get cherry picked ahead of him, just because he's a bit younger and stuff like that. So I really hope Mings can really lead us. He's a fantastic player. It's exactly the type of centre half you want to build your club around and team around. And he was obviously a major part of us getting up and staying up, and hopefully he's there with us all the way. And I just love for a lot of these guys, they've put a lot in. You think of the Matt Targetts of the world, John McGinn, as you say, the likes of Traore, El Ghazi, Trezeguet. Like, you forget with somebody like Trezeguet, because he's probably an average enough player, but he kept the team up 2 years ago. He scored the goal against Arsenal. He scored 2 against Palace. These were goals that if we didn't score, we wouldn't have stayed up. So a lot of guys in there that I'd love them to have a good year. I don't know how good it can be, but I'd love it, because they really deserve it. And for Dean Smith, I mentioned earlier how much he's evolved as a manager, and hopefully this is the year he can really show that. And maybe, if I close my eyes and dream, that we would Pip finishing 6th or 7th or something, and we might get, Europa League football. And that's probably a bit wishful thinking, but I think with this squad, I think that the missing link is another man from Southampton, JWP. I think if he's in the squad by the end of August, I think I'll make a prediction that we'll finish in Europe.
AWB, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks, guys.
And Sean, thanks a million.
Cheers, Dan.
At Tackling Sports social media, this podcast will be available tomorrow morning in your podcast feed, so do give us a follow if you missed it and you just caught the end of the live stream. And that's all I left to say. It's goodbye from us, and we will chat to you